Good morning to everybody. We will be today. I will be looking at another important aspect of Sila. In fact, morality and the monastic law, the connection between the two. Usually, a clear distinction is not made between the Vinaya and the Sila. But if you look at carefully, you can see that there is a important difference between Sila and the Vinaya. Okay, so we will try to see how this distinction can be clarified. Okay, so this is. Sila is the first aspect of the three trainings, Tissosika, under which the Eightfold Path is included. In the paths to Nirvana, Sila constitutes the essential moral training, which is the basics of which Samadhi is developed. Two together provides the basis for Panya, the final stage of the path. But Vinaya basically refers to the monastic rules for the proper conduct of the monks and nuns. According to the Vinaya Pitaka, Vinaya rules were made by the Buddha after 20 years of the beginning of the monastic order. In the early period of the Sangha, there were no rules, only Sila was there, which is not rules. Now, look at this very last sentence. Sila is not rules. So, in the Vinaya, we have rules. In the Sila, actually, we don't have rules. Now, there is a very important distinction between the two. Now, rule means, in a way, you can see some kind of monastic legal system. And then Sila is totally different from that. Now, if you look at the teaching of the Buddha, we have what is called Tissosika. Tissosika, three trainings. Now, three trainings are Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And if you look at Ariyatthangika Magga, Eightfold Path. Eightfold Path is analyzed into Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Now, you know, there is the important connection between the two things, Eightfold Path and Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Again, this connection has to be clearly understood within Tissosika, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Eightfold Path is included. But not that Eightfold Path is Sila, Samadhi, Panya included Eightfold Path, okay? If you look at Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Tissosika, it is in fact broader than the Eightfold Path, okay? Eightfold Path is, in other words, whether Tissosika, Sila, Samadhi, Panya are included within Eightfold Path, or whether Eightfold Path included within three trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Now, this question has been discussed, particularly in the sermon given by Dhammadinna to her former husband, Dhammadinna Theri. He asked this question, whether Tissosika included Ariyatthangika Magga or Ariyatthangika Magga included in Tissosika. She explains that Ariyatthangika Magga is included in Tissosika, okay? Now, Tissosika is the broad Buddhist path. Sikha means training. This is really the path to attain Nirvana. So, you start with Sila, and then from Sila, you move into the Samadhi, and then to Panya. So, Sila you need in order to attain, reach Samadhi, and both Sila and Samadhi are required to attain Panya. Now this is the basic connection. So Sila is the basis. Now the point I want to make is this. If you look at Vinaya and Sila, Sila was there from the very beginning, okay? But Vinaya came after 20 years. Now why? Now if Vinaya is equally important like Sila, or if there is no difference between the Vinaya and the Sila, then there is no point in saying that Vinaya rules were prescribed after 20 years. So if we accept that tradition, for 20 years in the monastic Sangha, there were no Vinaya rules. 20 years is a long time for an organization. So the organization began and there were no rules. Now what was there was Sila. Okay? So Sila is not rule really. Now this distinction we have to make clearly. So Vinaya basically refers to the monastic rules. Now whenever we talk about rule, actually we are talking about in a sense Vinaya is the law, or you can say Buddhist monastic law. Now whenever we talk about law and legal rules, important thing is it involves rules, and if you violate the rules, then there is a punishment. Okay? So basically Vinaya is, we can describe Vinaya as Buddhist monastic law, or you can say Buddhist monastic legal system. So Buddhist monastic law or Buddhist monastic legal system. So this is, we can say, Vinaya. Now if we take Sila, we can say path to attain Nirvana. Now, you might think that are these two things are completely different from each other. Actually, they are not completely different from each other, but the emphasis of the two is different, okay? They are not completely different from each other. They are connected, okay? Important thing is you cannot talk about Vinaya rules without talking about Sila. However, you can talk about Sila without talking about Vinaya rules. Okay? I mean, that is why in the first 20 years there was no Vinaya rules, but there was Sila. But then subsequently, Sasana started having Vinaya rules. So Vinaya rules are basically the monastic law or monastic legal system, and Nirvana, we can say Nirvana is the path to Sila is the path to Nirvana. So there is this basic distinction between the two. Now we will look at further how to make sense out of this distinction. The main idea of Vinaya rules or laws is that violation of rules involves punishment, whereas violation of Sila does not involve any punishment. Now you know this is very important. Whenever we talk about the legal system, law, if you violate the rule, there is always a punishment for that. Law means that when you establish a legal system, now for example, you look at the legal system of the country. Now any country will have a legal system. And if you violate the legal system, if you break any rules, then you will be punished. Or there will be some penalty. You know, when you drive on the road, there are certain rules you have to follow. Now, if you don't follow the rules, if you violate the rules, then you will be punished, or you will have to pay a penalty for that. Now, for any kind of institute, if you take an institute like this, there are certain rules and regulations. There are certain do's and don'ts. Certain things you can do and certain things you cannot do. Okay? Now, these can do and cannot do things, if you violate these things, there is some sort of punishment or penalty for that. Okay? Now, this is basically an important distinction. The Buddha did not like to impose rules on the Sangha. One obeys rules out of fear of punishment. This is not the ideal state the Buddha expected from his monastic followers. But when the community had bad elements, rules had to be brought in. Now, I'm sure you know there were several discussions before Buddha came out with Vinaya rules. There were several discussions, particularly when Venerable Sariputta at one point suggested to the Buddha that the Sasana should have a Vinaya system of Vinaya rules. But then Buddha said, no, wait, I will know the time when the Vinaya rules should be established. So Buddha did not do that. Buddha took time. Now the idea was that Buddha did not want to come up with Vinaya rules. One important thing is until certain conditions arose. Unless there was no specific rules, Buddha did not want to have the Vinaya rules. In other words, it's like this. When the Buddha started the monastic organization, Buddha did not start with a set of rules. Okay, now today, if we are starting an organization, usually what we do is we make a constitution for that. For a country, there is a constitution. Also for an institute, there is a constitution. Constitution means some kinds of legal system is there. So we usually start, if you want to start a society, we always make a constitution of the society. Now that is how we do. But when we look at the Buddha Sasana, you can see that the way Buddha adopted was different. Buddha did not start with a set of rules. Okay? He did not start with a set of rules. The basic thing is you can see that Buddha was reluctant. Buddha did not like to have rules or people following rules. Now why is this? Now basically when you obey a rule, you obey the rule because you are scared of punishment. You don't like the punishment. Now if you are not punished, then of course people will violate rules. You know, this is a very important thing because rules we obey because we don't want to be punished. In other words, we don't like punishment, therefore we obey rules. But it means that if you, in your real heart, you will not be obeying rules. You don't like to obey rules. You obey rules simply because you have to obey it. Otherwise, there is always a punishment. But you know, the important thing is, if you are really understanding person, then you will not be obeying rules because you know you will receive a punishment if you violate it, but you will obey the rules simply out of your good nature. Now there is a difference between the two. So Buddha did not want his disciples to obey the rules only. Don't misunderstand this. It doesn't mean that Buddha did not want disciples to obey the rules. No. But the Buddha did not want his disciples to be only obeying rules out of fear. Now that is not a very good thing because you are obeying rules out of fear. But that also means that if you can violate a rule without getting caught, you will do that. Then what happens is, like the spirit of the seal is lost. Now there are many situations where people will be violating rules if they know that they will not get caught. So there are many things like that. If nobody sees, people will do many things. But people will not do these things because people will, other people will see. So it is not your, really your conviction. It is simply there is a rule, so you have to obey, otherwise you will have to face the consequences. So that's why you do that. Now, if you look at society, you can see this very often. If people can violate rules without getting caught, many people will do that. Many people will do that. Now, on the road, in some places, in some countries, there are cameras set up. So if you go beyond the certain speed limit, you are noted. Now, because of that, so if the camera catches you, then of course you will get a punishment for that. Now, as a result, what you do is when you see the camera or when you know that camera is there, then you will be driving in a proper manner, in a proper speed. Otherwise, you will speed if there are no camera. Now, so the rule in a way disciplines you. But that discipline is not really inner discipline. Idea is that if you can violate the rule without getting caught, then of course you will be violating it. So in that sense, we can say that Buddha did not like to impose rules on the Sangha. One obeys the rules out of fear of punishment. Okay? This is not the ideal state Buddha expected from his monastic followers. Okay? Because the Buddha says that at one point, you read in the Majjhima Nikaya, there is a very important discourse called Bhaddali Sutta. Bhaddali Sutta is very important in this connection. This is in the Majjhima Nikaya. There is a very interesting discussion here between the Buddha and the disciple. The question is, this disciple says that when there were few rules, monks were well behaved. Now there are many rules, monks are not behaving well. So he asked, what is the reason for this? So when there were fewer rules, monks were behaving well. But when there are more rules, they were not behaving well. There are so many rules, but of course people are not behaving well. Now this is really the situation. You have so many rules, but people violate them. So in the Sasana also there was that situation. And then as you know, Buddha went on saying that any organization, Sasana as the organization, when it grows in certain things, labhagga mahatta. For example, when the organization getting so many things, when the organization getting old, whenever you are new to something, you are behaving well. But when you get used to it, then you don't care very much. So Buddha says, when the organization, the Sasana, getting advanced in age, when people get more experience, when the monks get so many things, and then also the learnedness of the monks increased. So there are these conditions. Fame of the organization goes round. So Buddha gives this labhagga mahatta, asagga mahatta, bahusacca mahatta, and so on. He gives these reasons. and says this: when these things come to an organization, people take the organization lightly. Okay. So the question was very important because at the point there were almost no rules, but people were behaved well. But then there was a situation, there was more rules, but the monks are not behaving well. Now, you know, if you take the Vinaya Pitaka, for the monks, you know, and the nuns, there are 220 and 311 Vinaya rules. I mean, fairly big number, right? Now, these Vinaya rules did not come in one day. Vinaya rules did not come, Buddha did not start, as I said earlier, with a set of Vinaya rules. But gradually, when things were happening, as a response to these different happenings, Buddha came up with you know, the Vinaya rules. Now you are familiar with Parajika Pali and Pachitya Pali. When you read Parajika Pali and Pachitya Pali, you have all the Nidana Katha. You know, what happened, what are the conditions that develop in order to you know, Vinaya rules to come up. Now then, when ultimately came to a situation where Vinaya rules had to be prescribed, Buddha said that he is doing it for 10 reasons. Again, I am not going to describe all these things in detail because I expect you to be familiar, but Buddha says Sangha Suttutaya, Sangha Pasutaya, for the convenience of the Sangha. And then, even more importantly, Dummang Kunang Puggalanang Niggahaya, Pesalanang Bhikkhunang Pasuviharaya. So on the one hand, you have Dummanku, and then on the other side, you have Pesala Bhikkhu. There are good bhikkhus. Now they become embarrassed and they face difficult situations when people behave badly. So the bad behavior has to be stopped. In order, there must be a way to punish the people who are behaving bad. On the other hand, there must be a way to distinguish between good people and the bad people. Okay. And then Buddha goes on like that. Sasana, Asavanam Sangvaraya, and so on. So here you can see, when you examine these reasons, you can see most of the reasons are connected to the Sangha organization, okay? Connected to organization. But then ultimately Buddha says, Ditta Dhammikanang Asavanang Sangvaraya, Samprayikanang Asavanam Pahanaya. Now, asava also included. Now, asava means when you completely do away with asava, of course, you attain nirvana. But that also is included. However, more emphasis is given to the organizational aspect. Okay. Now, this you have to be, seen very clearly, because ultimately, if you follow the Vinaya rules, you are also observing the Sila. So from that point of view, Vinaya ultimately leads to extinction of asava. But more than that, however, in the Vinaya, what is meant is the organizational behavior. The longevity of the organization, okay? So, now that's something important we have to understand. Now Vinaya rules have their jurisdiction within the Sangha only. These rules are not applicable beyond the Buddhist monastic community. Even for the Buddhist household community, Upasaka and Upasika, the Buddha did not make rules or laws. The Buddhist householders come under the secular rule and not under the Buddha or Buddha Sasana. Now this aspect, the jurisdiction, that means the power of operating. So now Vinaya rules are there. Vinaya rules are applicable only to the monks and nuns, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, okay? Now, Vinaya rules are not even applicable to the Upasaka and Upasika. In the Buddhist tradition, we know that there are Chattaro Parisa, 4 groups, Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni, Upasaka, Upasika. Now, Vinaya rules are only for the Bhikkhus and Bhikkhunis, not for Upasakas and Upasikas. Okay? Now, Upasaka and Upasika come from the ordinary society. Now, Buddhism doesn't have laws or Vinaya rules for the Upasakas and Upasikas. They come under the jurisdiction or the control of the state. Sometimes this point also taken wrongly by people. Sometimes people think that Buddhism has Vinaya rules for the lay people. I think that is a wrong view. Buddhism doesn't have Vinaya rules for the lay people. Then you might think, what about the Panchasila? Actually, Panchasila is not a Vinaya rules. Panchasila is not a Vinaya rule. If you look at carefully, I think I pointed out this in my last discussion also. Panchasila, you take Panatipata, Veramani, Sikkhapadam, Samadhiyami. So Samadhiyami means grammatically first person singular. I undertake to do something. Now, when you say I undertake to do, it is not a rule. It is something you voluntarily do. I undertake to observe. And if you violate it, you don't have to be accounting for anybody, you have to account for yourself. Because you undertake to do that, if you don't do it, then you have to be responsible to yourself. But the rules of a country, if you take, they are not like that. If you violate, you are responsible for the government. Now, in a somewhat similar manner, if the Vinaya rules are violated, then that Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni is responsible for to the Sangha. So, in the Vinaya rules, you don't have something like Samadhiyami, because the Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni Vinaya rules are there whenever you become a member of the Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni organization. You are automatically subject to these Vinaya rules. You can't say that, I don't want to observe these things. The very fact that you become a member of the Sasana is really you are becoming, you are undertaking to follow these Vinaya rules. So, this distinction, Vinaya rules have their jurisdiction within the Sangha. These rules are not applicable beyond the Buddhist monastic community. So, the Buddhist monastic Vinaya rules are applicable only to Buddhist monastic community. Okay? Now, so long as you are the Buddhist monastic member, these rules are applicable to you. Even for the Buddhist household society. So, it is very clear. Now, when someone, say for example, there is a Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni. Now, he leaves the Sasana and becomes a lay person. Now, Vinaya rules are not applicable to that person, right? Because he is not anymore a Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni. Now, when you are not a Bhikkhu or Bhikkhuni any longer, Vinaya rules are not applicable. I will give you a good example. Now, the highest offense, violation in the Vinaya is the Parajika violation, right? Now, when you are guilty of Parajika, you lose the membership of the Sangha. Now, what is the punishment for that? What is the Vinaya punishment for Parajika? Interestingly, there is no punishment. For the highest violation, there is no punishment. But in a way, but on the other hand, we can say there is a punishment. Punishment means you lose the membership. That is the punishment. But once you lose the membership, Vinaya rules are not applicable, so Vinaya cannot punish you anything further. So, in other words, when someone is guilty of Parajika, punishment is losing the membership of the Sangha. He becomes a lay person. That's all. But there is no any further punishment. Do you understand my point? Because now if you guilty of Sanghadisesa, if you guilty of Nisaggiya Pachitya, there are certain punishments. But of course, if you are guilty of Parajika, there is virtually no punishment, because the moment you become Parajika, you lose your Upasampada. You lose your membership in the Sangha. So once you lose the membership in the Sangha, you are no longer bhikkhu. But if you are no longer bhikkhu, then there is no further punishment to you. So the interestingly, in that way, other than losing the membership, there is no any further punishment for Parajika. However, suppose you become guilty of Parajika by killing a human being. Okay? Then by killing a human being, you become guilty of Parajika, then you lose your bhikkhuhood, monkhood, then you are an ordinary person. But as an ordinary person, you are under the law of the country. So by committing a murder, government will punish you. If it is the king, king will punish you. Do you see the point? So it is the Buddhism doesn't give you the capital punishment or anything. If you kill a person, the moment you kill the person, you lose the monkhood or nunhood. Then you are an ordinary man or woman. As an ordinary man or woman, the country law, the law of the society will take care of you. Same thing with stealing. You steal something, you lose the monkhood or nunhood. But when you lose the monkhood or nunhood, then you are an ordinary person, and then you will be punished by the government for stealing somebody's things. Now, you see how it operates. Because within the Sangha, the Vinaya rules are applicable only within the Sangha. Okay? They are not the outside the Sangha. So when you go away from the Sangha society, when you cease to be a member of the Sangha society, you are no longer responsible for your monastic behavior. Then you are a lay person. So, you know, this distinction is something very, very important. Vinaya rules are applicable. Vinaya rules have their jurisdiction within the monastic community only, not beyond that. Okay. So we'll move further. The main difference between Sila and Vinaya are that the former is soteriological or nirvanic, whereas the latter is organizational. Accordingly, Vinaya has a system of punishment, procedure for reinstating the guilty members, and a judiciary system. The organizational aspect of Vinaya becomes clear when the 10 reasons given for the establishment of the Vinaya rules are examined. I referred to this earlier: Sangha Suttutaya, Sangha Pasutaya, Dummangkunam Puggalanam Niggahaya, Pesalanam Bhikkhunan Pasuviharaya, and so on. So the main difference between Sila and the Vinaya are that the former is soteriological or nirvanic, whereas the latter is organizational. Now the distinction between the two. So if you take Vinaya rules are organizational. Vinaya rules are related to the organization. But Sila is path to Nirvana, so we can say it is nirvanic, soteriological. That's another word. So soteriological means leading to the emancipation, leading to the liberation, so the leading to the final goal. So the main difference between the Sila and the Vinaya, one is soteriological or nirvanic, latter is organizational. Organizational means actually Vinaya rules are there in order to preserve the integrity of the organization. Sangha organization, because Sangha as the organization has to be presented to the society in a certain manner. So Vinaya in that sense is the part of the organization, right? Now you can see why at the very beginning of the Sasana there was no Vinaya, because it was not really a large organization. There were people who wanted to follow the Buddha's path. They became and they came and became the followers of the Buddha, and then they had this single goal which they followed. So there was not much disturbance or trouble. But subsequently, gradually, when more and more people came to the Sasana, it developed to be a huge organization. Now, in order to understand how it became organization, if you read Vinaya Pitaka, Chulla and Mahavagga, you can see gradually how it became organization. Buddha, this story, Buddha sent first 60 Arahant into 60 different roads, areas, and then when they teach the Dhamma, people wanted to follow them. How to do that? Then gradually they had to be brought to the Buddha, and gradually how to make them Samaneras, how to make them Upasampada, and then what they should do. So you can see that gradually the organizational aspect developed. Okay, so in other words, Sikkhapadas started developing gradually. Okay, so now I said earlier, it also mentioned that first 20 years there was no Sikkhapadas. But that doesn't mean that the Buddha never talked about the behavior. But rather than making a Vinaya rule, Buddha talked about his own life. And then also Buddha advised them on what to do and what not to do. But they were not really rules. Now, for example, in the Bhaddali Sutta, this sutta you should read actually. Buddha says that before, I had to just to remind you this is good and this is bad. So pointing out something is good or bad is not really giving a rule. Okay? But it is simply saying that, okay, do it, it is good. Now, for example, about Vikala Bhojana, Buddha says, I take one meal, and taking one meal, you live a comfortable life. So, but Buddha never made it a rule. Okay? Buddha never made it a rule. So some people had a meal after the midday meal in the evening. Some people did not. But Buddha basically said that, look, monks, because I have only one meal. With one meal, I live a very comfortable life. So that Buddha encouraging the monks to have one meal. But at this early stage, Buddha never had a rule. So it was not a rule. So some people, it appears that, had a meal after the midday meal. But, it was not a no violation at all, because, in order to violate, there was no rule. Okay? But simply Buddha advised them, then, they followed it. However, subsequently what happened was, when you have Vinaya rules in an organizational manner, then there is a system of punishment and procedure for reinstating the guilty members, a judiciary system. Now, if you start from the judiciary system, now when you have Vinaya rules, there must be a mechanism to judge whether somebody has violated the rule or not. Okay. Now, who is going to do that? There must be some experts who know about Vinaya, who know about the procedures of how to determine whether somebody has violated a certain rule or not. Okay. So you can see gradually procedures started developing within the Buddhist tradition to deal with wrongdoers. So you have a judiciary system. In fact, I am not going to talk about in detail these things because this thing is a completely different, very important area in the Buddhist ethics. But I'm just discussing this only today with you, so I don't want to go into the details. But of course, when you study further, this whole thing is something very important for you to understand how the judiciary system developed within the Buddhist tradition, monastic judiciary system. So how to deal with the wrongdoers, how to decide, what are the factors to be decided. Now who should be the people who can decide, what are the qualifications of these people. Now there are a lot of things coming up. So therefore there is a judiciary system. And then this judiciary system, following it, there is a system of punishment. Now whenever you violate a rule, there is a punishment. Now there are many types of punishment prescribed in the Vinaya Pitaka, right? Particularly we know, like for example, certain things are probation, keeping under probation. They are not really necessarily punishment, but some steps. But then apart from that, you have actually a system of punishment. Tajjaniya kamma, ukkepaniya, pabbajaniya, patisaraniya. If you look at the system, you can see that a lot of things. Now for example, pabbajaniya. Pabbajati means you banish a person from monastic sangha. Now ukkepaniya. Ukkepaniya means also similar, you remove the person from that sangha community. Okay. Now sometimes, as I said earlier, when someone is guilty of parajika, of course that person has to be removed. But ukkepaniya, pabbajaniya are more like punishment. So the ukkepaniya, the person who becomes guilty and then given this punishment, of course he can be reinstated, brought back. And pabbajaniya also. And then there are other things like patisaraniya. Patisaraniya means reconciliation. Particularly that is associated with the dealings with the lay people. If a monastic member does something wrong to a lay person, that monastic member should really ask for the forgiveness of that lay person. That's something very, very important. So you have different types of punishment. And then tajjaniya. Tajjaniya means you censure. You really blame that person and show that person's guilt. So tajjaniya means, in a way, tajjeti means threatened. So it's a threat. You can see that it is not a pleasant thing, right? So it is a punishment, tajjaniya. And then also we have something called tassa papiya sika. Tassa papiya sika means dealing according to the wrongdoing. So according to the nature of the wrongdoing, judging by the nature of the wrongdoing, you deal with that person. So tassa papiya sika is also punishment. So you have this type of system of punishment. And also procedure for reinstating the guilty members. Now, for example, if it is sanghadisesa, second type of offenses, then there is a procedure called abhana, manatta, the procedure. So the manatta means you behave respectfully towards the sangha. That is manatta. And then you have abhana. The sangha calls you, ahvana. So in order to be qualified for abhana, you have to be undergoing probation. Parivasa. Parivasa means probation. That means probation means that particular member is kept under the scrutiny of the Sangha. So you have Parivasa. At the conclusion of the Parivasa, you have 6 days of Manatta, and at the conclusion of Manatta, Abhana. So the 20 members of the Sangha get together representing Sangha, and Abhana means calls that person back. Calling that person back means Abhana, in Sanskrit Ahvana, that means calling back means you are reinstated. In order to reinstate, in order to place you again in your normal position, you have to undergo certain procedures. Parivasa, Manatta, and then only the third level is the third stage is the Abhana comes. So again, these Vinaya studies is something very, very interesting branch of Buddhist studies. Now, if you look at carefully, in English language alone, there is quite a lot of studies on Vinaya. There are quite a lot of studies on Vinaya, particularly Vinaya and the legal system. One source is there is internet source. The Journal of Buddhist Ethics is free journal online. You can download it. Journal of Buddhist Ethics. If you really look at it, you can see there are many, many articles published on Vinaya matters. So Vinaya is Journal of Buddhist Ethics. Download this journal and you can see that some very important Vinaya matters are being discussed in some of these journals. Apart from that, there are many books translated into English and also written in English. There is another book by Venerable Thanissaro, this Thai monk who wrote Buddhist Monastic Discipline. Fairly substantial 2 books. Again, complete translation of Patimokkha and with the commentary and a lot of discussions. Those 2-volume book is also very, very useful book for Vinaya studies. So there are a lot of resources for you to really look into. Now, important thing is Vinaya has a system of punishment, procedure for reinstating the guilty, reinstating the guilty members, and also a judiciary system. So in that sense, the organizational aspect of Vinaya. Vinaya is needed in order to maintenance of the Vinaya. In the first Sanghayana, we are told that the Vinaya Pitaka was rehearsed first, and the reason the monks gathered at the Sanghayana said was Vinayo Nama Sasanas Ayu. The Vinaya is the life of the Sasana. Now actually Sasana, this word has 2 important meanings. One meaning of Sasana is the message of the Buddha. Message means the Dhamma. So Sasana is the message. In Dhammapada you have Sabba Papa Sakaranam, Kusalas Upasampada, Sachitta Pariyodapanam, Etang Buddhana Sasana. Their Sasana means message, teaching. However, Vinayonama Sasanasa Ayu, their Sasana means not necessarily the teaching of the Buddha, but the Sasana means Bhikkhu Sasana and Bhikkhuni Sasana. So they are the Sasana is used in the organizational sense. Sasana as an organization. Now initially Sasana was the teaching of the Buddha. But based on the teaching of the Buddha, subsequently an organization was developed. So that organization is basically what is called Buddha Sasana. So when it is said that Vinayo nama sasanasa ayu. Sasana there means the organization, as I understand. So the Vinaya or disciplinary system has to be there for an organization to run smoothly. Or legal system has to be there for an organization to run smoothly. But you can see in a way Buddha was reluctant. He really may have thought that if all the people who enter the sasana are very serious, they will be just governed by the sila alone. So Buddha did not want to be have an organization and also be head of the organization. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, there is one very interesting place where Buddha is close to Parinirvana. Then Venerable Ananda asked whether the Buddha would not address the Sangha before he attains Parinirvana. Or Buddha would not give some last message. Then Buddha says, Ananda, why do you have to do that? If I think that bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, this sasana is living for me, then I should do that. But I don't think so. Also, if I live for them, then again I will have to give a last statement. But sasana is not for me. Also, I am not living for the sasana. In other words, of course, Buddha was living in order to teach and guide the people. But he was referring to this organizational aspect. In other words, what the Buddha was telling was, I don't think I am head of the organization. Of course, on the other hand, we know that Buddha was the head of the organization, right? But in his own heart, Buddha did not want to be thought as head of an organization or have organization. Actually, the Vinaya rules, you can see that Buddha was reluctant. Buddha didn't like, but then he had to come up with Vinaya rules because there were certain problems. If the society was ideal, it would have run without Vinaya rules. But society was not ideal, so it had to have Vinaya rules. But the Buddha was really reluctant lawgiver. Now, a good example is in the Anguttara Nikaya, there is this, the Buddha's response to the monk who complained about 150 Vinaya rules, highlights the Buddha's open and pragmatic attitude towards the Vinaya rules. I hope some of you know this story. This comes in the Anguttara Nikaya. There, a monk complains to the Buddha, I cannot observe these 150 rules. So by that time there were only 150. But later that number grew up to be 200 plus, and for the nuns 300 plus. So this monk says, I cannot observe these 150 rules. Then the Buddha's response was very interesting. Buddha never said that, no, you have to observe all 150. Buddha never said that. Buddha said, that's okay. That's okay. Provided if you can observe only 3. Then this person who was distraught about observing 150, he said very willingly, yes, I will observe 3. But then what are the 3? Buddha said, Adi Sila Sikha, Adi Chitta Sikha, Adi Panya Sikha. When you observe Adi Sila Sikha, all 150s are observed. In other words, when you have your Sila, you don't have to think about the Vinaya rules. If you are a Silava, a person with Sila, rules are automatic. Okay? That's why Buddha said, if you can't observe 150, forget about 150, but just observe 3. But today you will not get that kind of response, right? But on the other hand, if you see carefully, you can see that the person who cannot observe 150, but if that person can observe 3, he is okay. Because Adi Sila means Sila. So if your Sila is okay, then of course you don't have to think about Vinaya rules, because a person with Silava will not really be able to violate anything in Vinaya rules. Although that person will not be thinking in terms of the Vinaya rules. He will not violate. He will not do anything wrong. He will not do anything improper. In other words, when a person has Sila, he kind of know. He has an idea what is the Vinaya rules. Maybe the person even will not be able to say all the Vinaya rules by heart or something. But still, he will be observing all the rules, not as rules. Simply when you become Silava, so this is the connection between the Sila and the Vinaya. Okay? This is the connection between Sila and the Vinaya. So long as you have Sila, your Vinaya is observed. But the question is, suppose you have observing all the Vinaya rules, then do you have your Sila? Now if you observe all the Sila, you have your all Vinaya rules. But if you observe all the Vinaya rules, do you have your Sila? Yes or no? Yeah, technically we have to say, if you observe all the rules, then you have your Sila also. But there can be a very subtle difference. A person can be observing, a monk or nun can be observing Vinaya rules simply out of fear of punishment. So he will be observing all the rules because he doesn't want to get punished. But that is not the proper attitude. You must be Silava not out of fear of punishment. You have to be Silava because you are following the path of the Buddha. But a person who is only observing Vinaya rules may not be good Silava. Because you observe the Vinaya rule simply because you don't want to be punished. That also means that you will not observe if you are not punished. So this punishment is really for not for very much developed people. I will give you an example. Now in Buddhism we have the concept of Apaya and Dibbaloka, heaven and hell. So people say that if you do bad things, you go to hell. If you do good things, you go to heaven. Okay? Now, if people do not do bad things simply because they are scared of going to hell, they can't be very good people. They simply scared of hell. That's why they are not doing bad things. But if there is no hell, they will do anything. But actually society has to be good in the sense, even if there is no hell after the death, you have to be doing good things because good things are good. And then also you don't do bad things because bad things are bad. But the usually heaven and hell are, these concepts are for ordinary people. Ordinary people, like small children. When you want to get something done by a small child, we will give a toffee or something, chocolate or something. And then he or she will do that. Why? Not because they love us, but simply because they love chocolate. So you do something, you give something and get something to do. I mean, that's okay, but that's not the perfect situation. Because simply that child does it, he wants to get something. And then the child can be prevented from doing something just to say that there will be a punishment. So this, the punishment, reward and punishment is not the ideal reason for good and bad, okay? Basically, ordinary society goes for reward and punishment. You get a reward, you do good thing. You get a punishment, you don't do bad things. But that should not be the ideal thing. Now this, if you look at the Sila and the Vinaya, Buddha's attitude was this. Sila you observe if you want to attain Nirvana. Now, the Buddha's statement to this particular monk who did not want to observe all 150 rules, actually that is Vinaya. But then Buddha's answer was something like this: forget about Vinaya, do Sila. Okay, that is the kind of attitude. But don't misunderstand what I am saying. I am not saying that you should discard the Vinaya, but in here you can see that the more important thing is to be Silava, to have your Sila. But then if you don't have your Sila, then of course just observing the Vinaya rule alone is not proper. There are many situations where you people observe the rule, but violate the Sila. Now, for example, in the Theravada tradition, we know that Upasampada monks are not supposed to pluck flowers, right? So, for a Upasampada monk, if you want to have some flowers, how would you do that? You will get a Samanera or somebody, boy or girl, you will say, oh, I like to have some flowers. Or you will say that this is the time for me to offer flowers. Then other person has to understand that. You don't directly say that pluck flowers and bring it to me, right? You simply indicate that. Okay, you want this particular tree to be cut. You don't say cut the tree. You say, I don't like this tree here. Okay. Now, this Samanera or this Ghat will have to understand what he says. So, when the monk says, I don't like this tree here, you have to cut it and remove it. But monk doesn't say, cut the tree. So, what really happened there? Your Vinaya rule was observed, okay. But was your Sila observed? No. Sila was not observed, but Vinaya rule was observed. Then you are not guilty for cutting a tree or asking someone to cut the tree. You didn't ask him to cut the tree. You said simply you don't like it. Okay. Now, I am just giving you this example. You know more examples more than I do. But you can see this is the difference between the Sila and the Vinaya. Vinaya rule, you can sort of bypass sometime without really violating it. But then what happens is, when you do like that, whether your Sila is observed. This distinction is very important. So, Buddha's response to this monk is something like that. What is more important is, for you to be Silava. However, I mean, don't misunderstand it, because, in the organizational sense, for an organization, it is important to have a set of rules, and people are following the rules for the sake of organization. But when you really look at the soteriological goal, I think it has to be observed not by the letter but by the meaning. The difference between Sila and Vinaya may be demonstrated with reference to the twofold division of faults, namely naturally wrong acts, Pakati Vajja or Loka Vajja, and acts considered to be wrong according to the Vinaya rules, Panyati Vajja. Now, I think some of you know this distinction. Vajja means wrong things. So, there is a concept called Pakati Vajja. Pakati means Prakruti. Certain things are wrong by nature. Or Loka Vajja. Certain things are wrong because they are being considered in the world as wrong. So, Loka Vajja or Pakati Vajja, both means the same here. But Pakati Vajja means certain things are wrong in themselves. Okay? The other one is Panyati Vajja. Panyati Vajja means certain things are wrong because they are considered to be wrong in the Vinaya. Otherwise, they are not wrong. Now, the distinction. The first category refers to the forms of behavior which are morally wrong and considered to be wrong in the world, Loka Vajja. The second is the forms of behavior prohibited by the Buddha for the monastic community. They are not morally wrong. Now, there is a distinction between certain things are morally wrong, certain things are not morally wrong. but prohibited by the Buddha. I think one of my earlier discussions, I briefly mentioned this to you. I think I gave the example, if you are a monk or nun, say for example, laughing and running on the road is bad. But laughing and running on the road is not morally wrong. It's not like killing a person. It's not like stealing something. But why laughing and running on the road is not good? Because it is not good for the organization. It doesn't look nice when a Buddhist monk or nun runs on the road. But running on the road is not a papa. If you look at that way, running on the road is not a papa. But it can be akusala. Akusala means unskillful thing, but not a papa. Okay? So the Panyati Vajja are like that. Now for example, you take Vikala Bhojana. Vikala Bhojana means not taking any meal after midday. But you know, if you look at it, you know, eating after midday is not a papa. But it is only a violation, it is a Panyati Vajja. But for the society, you know, they consider it to be very important because Buddhist monks don't have any meal after the midday. It's okay. But why it is? It is actually for many reasons, but it is not a moral reason. Why the Buddha said, those when you eat too much, you can't meditate. You become sleepy. And you know, there are so many things. Also, you have to go for Pindapata in the evening, which is not very convenient. So Buddha said that just have one meal. But having 3 meals or 2 meals is not a moral issue. Lay people have 3 meals, but that doesn't mean morally bad. Do you see the distinction? Now, Vikala Bhojana is a Panyati Vajja. Lot of Sakyas, if you look at how to eat, how to politely eat, when don't make noise, all those are Panyati Vajja. Those are wrong because Buddha has said those things are wrong. Why Buddha has said those things are wrong? Because they are important for the organization. When you eat politely, people like you. When you eat impolitely, people don't want to look at you. So, you know, polite way of behavior. Antarghare, how to go to the village. Whether you wear a robe or not in the monastery, when you go outside the monastery, you have to wear properly. But if you are in your room, how you wear your robe is not a very important thing. So you can see Panyati Vajja. But then there are other things, Pakati Vajja. Now if you look at the Vinaya Pitaka, Vinaya rules, you can see Vinaya rules are either Panyati Vajja or Pakati Vajja, or sometimes, you know, they can be both. For example, if you take killing a human being, it's Pakati Vajja, it's wrong. It's not simply because Buddhist Vinaya has it, but you know, normal circumstances, you know, killing is wrong. So you have that distinction. So the first category refers to the forms of behavior which are morally wrong and considered to be wrong in the world. So the Lokavajja, Pakati Vajja, 2 different terms, but of course refer to the same set of things. The second is the forms of behavior prohibited by the Buddha. For the monastic community, they are not morally wrong. In the Vinaya, while there are rules concerning moral violations such as killing, stealing, etc., which are punishable by the state law, a larger majority of Vinaya rules are relevant to the violations considered to be wrong only in the Vinaya. They are relevant only to the monastic community. The state law has nothing to do with such violations. Now you see, if a Buddhist monk kills a person, as I said earlier, he loses the monkhood, he becomes an ordinary person. Then government will punish him. But you know, if a Buddhist monk runs on the road, government has nothing to do with that. He is not violating a government law, right? If a Buddhist monk has dinner, government has nothing to do with that. Okay? It's not a crime. So there, if you look at the Vinaya, if you look at Vinaya, there are many rules like that. Don't start eating in the night, because I am saying this, but what I am saying is, simply the distinction between the Panyati Vajja and the Pakati Vajja. So Panyati Vajjas are wrong only within the Sasana. And Pakati Vajja is wrong in the world, in the society. So this distinction, has to be, so they are relevant only to the monastic community. The state law has nothing to do with them. This decision may be clarified, analyzed in two Parajika Vinaya rules. Of course, I just read it and will go on. One is the defeat involving killing a human being. This comes not under, but under Pakati Vajja, or a crime by its very nature, Pakati, and is considered a crime by the world. For this violation, the Vinaya punishment is the loss of the membership in the Sangha. Once the offender loses the membership or the Sangha and becomes an ordinary civilian, the state law will take care of him. The defeat involving sexual intercourse is not a crime by its nature. It is wrong only for the members of the Sangha. When one is guilty of this violation, he or she loses the membership of the Sangha and nothing beyond that. This is not an offense punishable by the state. So if you look at these two Parajikas, one is Lokavajja, one is Pakati Vajja. But within the monastic tradition, of course, both are equally weighty, because both are equally very important offenses. So this is basically the distinction between what I would like to call Pakati Vajja and the Panyati Vajja. According to the distinction of Akusala and Papa, Pakati Vajja is both Akusala and Papa, whereas Panyati Vajja is only the varying degrees of Akusala. Now, this distinction between Papa and Akusala we discussed earlier. I also told you that all the Papa is Akusala, but all the Akusala is not Papa, right? All the Akusala can be not Papa. Now, for example, violating a Panyati Vajja Vinaya rule is an Akusala, but it is not a Papa. You are not going to go to Apaya by running on the road. Okay? But that's an Akusala. Akusala means that's not a skillful, that is not a clever thing for you to do. But that's not a Papa. So, if you look at these Pakati Vajja and Panyati Vajja concepts, and also Papa and Akusala, you can see Pakati Vajja is both Akusala and Papa. If you kill a human being, it is both, it's Akusala and also it's a Papa, right? It's a Papa. However, whereas Panyati Vajja is only the varying degrees of Akusala. Sabba, more Akusala, Samma less Akusala. This distinction between Sila and Vinaya has ultimately to do with the primacy of the Dhamma from which the Vinaya gets its justification. In other words, Vinaya derives from the Dhamma, Sila belongs to the Dhamma. Now, this last paragraph actually we need to be discussing in detail, but I am not planning to discuss it in detail. But if you take Dhamma and the Vinaya, really Vinaya is based on the Dhamma. Okay? Now, Vinaya rules come from the Dhamma. The best example is, if you take Sila and the Vinaya, Sila is the part of the Dhamma, right? Sila is the part of what the Buddha taught. Sila is the part of the Visuddhi Magga, the path for purification. And the Vinaya rules are based on the Sila. In other words, Vinaya rules are really the explication or elaborations of how would you observe your Sila. So therefore, if you take Dhamma and the Vinaya, you can see that Vinaya is based on the Dhamma. Okay? So on the Dhamma, the Vinaya derives its validity. Why Vinaya rules? You have to explain according to the Dhamma. Now, that is why Dhamma is more basic than the Vinaya. Now, if you take a certain Vinaya rule, stealing is wrong. You can ask why. Now, stealing is wrong because you steal because of your desire. Now, it is because of the desire we undergo suffering. Dukkha is because of tanha. You steal something belongs to any other person because of your tanha. So, tanha is bad, therefore stealing is bad. So, if somebody asks why according to Buddhism stealing is wrong, then you have to go to the Dhamma. With reference to Dhamma. Now, why Vikala Bhojana is wrong? If you eat too much, then you become sleepy, then you cannot meditate, ultimately you cannot attain Nirvana. Now, the life is to attain Nirvana. So, if something is obstructing it, then that is bad. So, for any Vinaya rule, you can go to the Dhamma and explain. Vinaya says, Supatichanno Antaragare. When you go to the village, you have to be having properly dressed. Why? Because then only people like the monks and nuns. When they like the monks and nuns, they support them. When people support them, they can live their monastic life and attain Nirvana. So like that, you can connect everything to Nirvana, everything to the Dhamma. So the justification of Vinaya always based on the Dhamma. So with reference to Dhamma, you have to justify the Vinaya rules. Okay. So this is basically the idea. Okay. What I try to explain this morning discussion is basically the connection between the Sila and the Vinaya. Very often we do not make a distinction. We think Sila is Vinaya and Vinaya is Sila. Of course, both are connected. But as I said, in the Sasana, there was Sila without Vinaya. For 20 years, there was Sila without Vinaya. So Vinaya came later. So we can say, we can have Vinaya without, we can have Sila without Vinaya, but we can't have only Vinaya without Sila. Because Sila is the basis of Vinaya. Okay? So this is the basic point I wanted to clarify in this morning discussion between Sila and the Vinaya. So ultimately, the distinction between Sila and Vinaya has to do with the primacy of the Dhamma from which Vinaya gets its justification. In other words, Vinaya derives from the Dhamma, Sila belongs to the Dhamma. So the Sila is the basis, Sila is part of the Tisso Vidya, as I explained to you at the very beginning. Okay, all right. I will wind up from this. Do you have any questions or comments or anything? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yeah.
And some of we are associated for it's good. If they will be the media can get benefit or the life.
Okay, okay, thank you. His question is, I said that Vinaya rules are not applicable to the lay people. I said there are no rules for lay society. But he asked whether there are certain Vinaya rules, if lay people follow, then it will be beneficial for them, right? So that's what he says. It is true. Actually, if lay people can follow some rules, that is good. But what I meant is, they are not rules, they are not punishable if they don't follow it. Now that is the point. Now if the monastic community doesn't follow it, then they are punishable. But if the lay society If they don't follow it, you can't punish them. Nobody can punish it. Because lay society doesn't come within the monastic sangha. So the violation affects only the within the sangha. So if you take the Bhikkhuni Vinaya, if the Bhikkhunis don't follow it, they can be punished by the Bhikkhunis. In the Bhikkhu Vinaya, if they don't follow it, they can be punished by the Bhikkhus. But lay people, no. That is the. But of course, they are. I mean, the certain things like if you take Sekya, particularly how to eat politely, those are very good for lay society also. But the difference is like they are not applicable as rules. In other words, in Buddhism there are no laws for lay people. That's the idea. But of course, some Vinaya rules could be very helpful and useful even for lay people. Yeah. Yes. Right.
Question. This question is not my idea. Because last week, a foreigner came into my nunnery. At the time, he said, in Buddhism, most of the principles are very good to be good Buddhism. At the time, if a non-Buddhist person, he were to stay in Buddhism, at the time, what are important rules to be good Buddhism? Thila, restraint, or Samadhi, that are without dharana. At the time, I reply, if a lay person, he want to restrain Thila, five precepts. It's very important. He replied, so five precepts is laid down by the Buddha. I reply, is a Buddha laid down. Today, in your slide, the Buddha did not make a rule. Thila is not a rule. Even for the Buddhist community, the Buddha, he came under the secular law, no under the Buddha and Buddha Dharana. If so, my answer is right or wrong, I cannot understand.
Okay, thank you. Your question is also related to the other question. Now the question about Panchasila. Actually, Panchasila was laid down by the Buddha to the lay people. My point is this. Now suppose lay person violate Panchasila, monks or nuns have nothing to do with that. Monks and nuns cannot punish them. If a monk violates the Sila, then monks can punish them. Now the lay society, that is why I say in the lay society, although Buddha prescribed, it is not as a law or rule. It is a good thing to do. When you are a Buddhist, of course you have to observe 5 precepts. As I said, when the lay person takes 5 precepts, he says, Ahang samadhyami. That means I undertake to observe. It's not like somebody asking you to observe. I undertake to observe. So if I don't observe, it is my problem. I have to be responsible for myself, not to anybody else. Actually, I was trying to distinguish between moral precept and rule. Moral precept is something morally good, we do it on our own. A rule is something we do because we are a member of an organization. Now Panchasila is not that type of thing. Panchasila is any Buddhist has to observe Panchasila. But it doesn't have any legal thing. Of course in the Panchasila there are certain things. If you kill, Buddhism will do nothing, but the government will punish you. If you steal, Buddhism will not do anything, but government will do something. If you tell lies, government will do something. And that is the distinction, okay? Because when you violate 5 precepts, almost all 5 precepts are also government rules, regulations. Now for example, if you drink alcohol, in your home and go to bed and sleep, nobody can punish you. But according to Buddhism, even that is wrong. But no government will punish you drinking in inside the house, right? But if you come out and do something bad, then of course you will be punished. You see the difference? So, it's true that Buddha prescribed the 5 precepts, but it is different from the monastic Vinaya. Nature is different. That's my point actually. So, Buddha prescribed, Buddha says these things are good for lay people. Now, actually in the commentary, Sigalovada Sutta is described by the word Gihi Vinaya. That is the only time we have this concept of Gihi Vinaya. Because Gihi doesn't have Vinaya in Buddhism. But Sigalovada Sutta is in the commentary described as the Gihi Vinaya. Now what is the Gihi Vinaya? Sigalovada Sutta. Not to drink, get up early morning, do work properly, don't waste money, you know those things are. So those are good things. So the Reverend, the answer is that yes, Buddha prescribed moral principles to lay people, but they are different from monastic law. So they are not punishable. That's the difference. Anything else? You don't have to agree with everything I said here, so if you have disagreement, that's fine, you know. This is how I understand it, but okay, then I think there are no more questions, so we will wind up the morning discussion from this. In the afternoon, we will be meeting 2:30 to discuss world religion. So thank you very much for participating.